One
Stick with me
afternoon,
while I share my
while
story.
meeting a client who
And
had
if it touches
connections in
you,
the city's social
don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I thought my life was perfect when I married Mark. He seemed like the man of my dreams, kind, caring, and devoted. At least, that's what I believed in the beginning. I was 28, full of hope, and ready to build a life with him. I loved him with all my heart, and I truly wanted to start a family together. But what I didn't know was that his family had a different plan, one that didn't include me. It started slowly. Little comments here and there, questions that carried judgment, looks that made me feel small. Linda, Mark's mother, was the worst. She always made sure I knew I wasn't good enough. "Maybe it's time to think about having children," she would say, her voice sweet but dripping with criticism. At first, I brushed it off, thinking she was just concerned. But the comments became sharper, more personal, and harder to ignore. Family dinners, which I once looked forward to, turned into moments of dread. I tried to smile, to be polite, to ignore their jabs, but nothing worked. Every visit seemed like a test I was destined to fail. Even Mark, who had always seemed supportive, started avoiding confrontation, letting his mother speak for him. The person I trusted the most began to fade into silence whenever the insults came. Then one evening, everything came to a head. I was sitting in the living room, hoping for a peaceful night, when Linda began speaking in front of everyone, her words sharp and public. "Emma, maybe it's better if you consider leaving. We all know you haven't given Mark what he needs." My heart sank, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was as if I had been waiting for this moment my whole life, but the shock still hit me like a punch. Mark didn't defend me. He just looked down, his silence louder than any words could have been. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and alone in the place I had once called home. They handed me my things, and I walked out of that house with my head high, but my heart broken. Every step felt heavy, like I was carrying the weight of their judgment. The door closed behind me, and I realized I had been cast aside for something beyond my control. In that moment, I swore I wouldn't let this break me completely. I didn't know how I would survive, but I knew I had to. The pain was sharp, but it also lit a fire inside me. I refused to let their cruelty define my worth. I refused to let their small-mindedness decide my future. And that's where my real journey began, one they had no idea would lead me back to them in a way they would never forget. After leaving Mark's house, life hit me harder than I ever imagined. The world felt empty, and I carried a constant ache in my chest. I didn't just lose a home. I lost the sense of belonging I had thought I would have forever. Bills piled up, my savings weren't enough, and every day I wondered how I would survive on my own. Feeling abandoned and worthless became my new normal. Nights were the hardest. I would sit alone in my small rented apartment, replaying every cruel word and every disappointed look, questioning if I had ever done anything right. I decided to move back to Denver, the city I had grown up in. Being back in familiar streets and seeing old friends brought a small comfort, but the sting of betrayal still lingered. I couldn't run from the past, but I could try to rebuild the future. I leaned on skills I had often taken for granted, organizing events, planning, and connecting with people. I reminded myself that I was capable, that I could create something meaningful even when the world seemed determined to pull me down. It was around this time that Sarah came back into my life. She was a friend from college, someone who had always believed in me, even when I had doubted myself. When she saw how much pain I carried, she didn't just offer sympathy. She gave me direction. "Emma," she said, "don't waste another second letting them define you. Use this time to focus on yourself, your dreams, your career. You are worth so much more than their opinions." Her words sank in slowly, but they became my anchor. I realized that while I couldn't erase the hurt, I could channel it into something productive. I spent hours reflecting on the betrayal I had experienced. I thought about Mark, about Linda, about the whole family. For a while, anger and sadness consumed me, but gradually, a quiet fire grew inside me. I understood that letting them control my self-worth would only give them more power. I began to remind myself that I was not broken, not weak, and not defined by their cruelty. Their rejection, their judgment, it belonged to them, not me. Each day, I pushed myself a little more. I explored small freelance jobs, volunteered in community events, and slowly regained a sense of purpose. The heartbreak didn't vanish overnight, but I learned to sit with it, to let it guide me rather than consume me. A quiet rage simmered inside, not destructive but determined, a promise to myself that I would rise above what had been done to me. And in that simmering anger, I found the first spark of hope, the first glimpse of the life I could build for myself, far from the shadow of those who had cast me aside. I decided it was time to take control of my life and focus on something I could truly excel at. Event planning had always interested me, and I realized it was the perfect way to channel my energy and creativity. I started small, taking on modest projects, birthday parties, local gatherings, and community events, but I poured my heart into every detail. Every successful event gave me a sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in years. I rented a small apartment in Denver, modest but comfortable, and threw myself into my work. Long hours became normal, and I often sacrificed weekends, but I didn't mind. For the first time, I was building something entirely for myself. Slowly, word of my work spread. Clients began to trust me, recommend me, and seek me out for larger events. Each recognition felt like a quiet victory, a reminder that my worth wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. It was during this time that I met Rebecca, a woman who changed the way I saw success. She was smart, confident, and fiercely independent, a self-made entrepreneur who had built her reputation from nothing. Rebecca noticed my determination and offered guidance. "Never settle for less than you deserve, Emma," she told me. "Your value isn't measured by anyone else, and success is sweetest when it's earned on your own terms." Her words struck a chord. Under her mentorship, I learned to negotiate better, market my skills, and aim for bigger projects. Rebecca became more than a mentor. She became proof that I could rise without leaning on anyone who had doubted me. As I worked tirelessly, I grew stronger, more confident, and more independent. I began to understand the power of quiet revenge, not through confrontation or anger, but through success that proved my worth without ever needing to announce it. I kept my achievements private, sharing them only with close friends like Sarah and Rebecca. The thought of Mark and his family learning about my progress didn't drive me. It was simply a silent acknowledgement that I had moved beyond them. Each new project was a test, and with every challenge, I proved to myself that I was capable. I learned to trust my instincts, handle setbacks with patience, and celebrate my wins, big or small. The work wasn't easy, but it was mine, and it gave me freedom. Slowly, the hurt and bitterness that had lingered after my departure began to fade. In its place, I found pride, resilience, and a quiet determination to build a life that no one could take away. I realized that the journey wasn't just about proving others wrong. It was about reclaiming my life, my confidence, and my happiness. Every successful event, every satisfied client, and every new opportunity was a step toward a future I controlled, one where my past no longer dictated my present. And deep down, I knew that one day, the life I was creating would speak louder than any words of judgment ever could. Months of hard work began to pay off, and my little event planning business started gaining serious traction. What had once been small gatherings turned into larger projects, and word of mouth brought in clients I could never have imagined. Then one day, I landed a major contract for a charity gala that would be covered in the local news. Suddenly, my name was being mentioned alongside respected planners in Denver, and I realized my work was finally being recognized. It was exhilarating, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly succeeding on my own terms. With this success came a new sense of confidence. I no longer felt the weight of others' opinions pressing down on me. Living independently, I could finally make choices for myself without worrying about judgment. I decorated my apartment the way I wanted, spent evenings pursuing hobbies I had neglected, and celebrated small victories without anyone else's approval. There was no bitterness in me anymore, just a calm determination to continue building my life. I wasn't trying to get revenge actively. My life itself had become the statement. One afternoon, while meeting a client for a new project, the conversation unexpectedly turned toward Mark and his family. I listened politely as the client mentioned that they were struggling with a new business venture, facing setbacks and losses. I didn't react outwardly, but inside, a small spark of satisfaction flickered. I didn't need to do anything. They were facing consequences of their own actions. It was a quiet moment, but it reminded me that life often has a way of balancing itself out. I kept my thoughts to myself, smiling politely, letting the information settle without showing any hint of triumph. Despite this, I couldn't ignore the pride swelling inside me. I had come so far from the woman who had left Mark's house in humiliation. Every challenge I had faced, every late night and stressful moment, had led me here. My confidence was no longer fragile. It was steady, grounded in hard work and personal growth. I realized that my achievements weren't just professional. They were proof that I could rise above betrayal and rejection. At the gala, I watched my team execute everything perfectly, knowing that this success wasn't just luck. It was my dedication, creativity, and resilience paying off. I felt a restrained anger mixed with triumph, a reminder of the people who doubted me and the hardships I had endured. But instead of letting it consume me, I channeled it into motivation to keep moving forward. That night, as I returned to my apartment, I felt a quiet satisfaction settle over me. I was living a life I had built myself, without depending on anyone who had once cast me aside. And even though I hadn't planned it, I couldn't help but notice the universe was starting to repay me in small, meaningful ways. Proof that my journey was far from over, and the best chapters were still ahead. One afternoon, while meeting a client who had connections in the city's social circles, I overheard something that caught my attention. Mark's engagement had ended, and his family was struggling financially because of a series of failed investments. It wasn't my business, but hearing it stirred a mix of emotions inside me. Part of me felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense that life had finally begun to balance itself. But more than that, it made me realize how far I had come and how different my path was now. Shortly after that, I received an unexpected invitation to a high-profile charity gala. It was the kind of event that attracted the city's elite, prominent business owners, and influential figures. When I looked closer, I saw that Mark's family would be attending. My heart skipped a beat, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a rush of anticipation. This wasn't just another event. It was an opportunity to step into a space they had once used to make me feel small, to show them the life I had built without them. I spent several days debating whether to go. I didn't want to appear petty or vengeful, but the thought of attending the gala, fully confident and successful, sparked a quiet thrill inside me. I imagined walking in, not angry or bitter, but composed and elegant, letting my presence speak louder than any words could. The suspense of seeing them again after everything made my stomach tighten, but it also filled me with energy I hadn't felt in years. I considered the risks. What if seeing them stirred old emotions or hurt me in ways I wasn't ready for? What if they noticed me and tried to undermine me in some way? But then I reminded myself of how far I had come, how many nights I had spent working tirelessly, proving to myself that I was strong, capable, and independent. Attending the gala wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about claiming my space, showing that I could move through life with grace, and that I had built a life they could never take from me. The night of the gala, I carefully planned my outfit, my presentation, and my demeanor. I wanted to be remembered, not for drama or confrontation, but for the confidence and elegance I had worked so hard to cultivate. Even as I prepared, a small, private smile formed on my lips. I wasn't going to yell, argue, or seek revenge openly. The real power would be in their realization that the woman they had thrown out was no longer broken, no longer dependent, and no longer invisible. As I got ready to step into that world again, I felt a mixture of excitement and calm determination. This was the twist of fate I had never expected, the moment where my hard work, patience, and resilience might finally intersect with the people who had doubted me the most. And deep down, I knew that whatever happened that night, I would emerge stronger, proud, and completely in control of my story. In the days leading up to the gala, I realized I couldn't just show up unprepared. This wasn't about drama or confrontation. It was about presence, about letting my life speak for itself. I carefully planned every detail of my return to their social circle. I wanted to be confident, composed, and undeniably successful, a reflection of everything I had worked so hard to achieve. My goal wasn't to humiliate them loudly, but to make my achievements clear in a way that would leave a lasting impression. I researched the event thoroughly, who would be attending, the layout, the order of speeches, and even small details about the family's connections. I wanted to anticipate every interaction without appearing rehearsed or arrogant. I knew that subtlety would make a stronger statement than any overt confrontation could. Every choice I made, from my outfit to the way I carried myself, was intentional. I wanted to exude elegance, confidence, and self-assurance. Part of my plan involved a symbolic gesture. I had prepared a brief presentation of my professional milestones, my growing business, the projects I had successfully managed, and the recognition I had earned locally. It wasn't meant to boast. It was meant to quietly show the life I had built on my own, the life they had dismissed and underestimated. I even included stories of my personal growth, the independence I had gained, and the small ways I had created happiness for myself. This was my subtle way of saying, I survived, I thrived, and I no longer needed your approval. Even as I meticulously prepared, I struggled with my emotions. I wanted to show them that I had triumphed, but I also didn't want to lose my composure or descend into bitterness. The balance between revenge and grace was delicate, and I reminded myself constantly that my dignity mattered more than any satisfaction from seeing them embarrassed. I wanted them to realize my worth, but I also wanted to walk away proud of myself, not consumed by anger. I practiced entering a room with poise, smiling without forcing it, and speaking with calm confidence. I visualized encounters with Mark and his family, imagining them noticing the strength, elegance, and success I carried with me. It was a strange mixture of nervousness and excitement, a tension that came from knowing I had finally earned the right to be there, on my own terms. By the night of the gala, every detail was in place. I had prepared my appearance, my mindset, and my story, all carefully calculated to leave a lasting impression without lowering myself to hostility. For the first time since I had been cast out, I felt a sense of control and power. I wasn't seeking revenge with words or confrontation. I was showing it through the life I had built, the respect I had earned, and the grace I carried. Proof that I had survived the past and come back stronger than they could have imagined. The night of the gala arrived, and the moment I stepped into the grand ballroom, I felt every ounce of confidence I had worked for radiate through me. The chandeliers reflected off my carefully chosen dress, my hair and makeup flawless, but more importantly, my posture, my smile, and the way I moved showed the transformation I had undergone over the past years. I was no longer the timid, uncertain woman they had cast aside. I was strong, accomplished, and completely in control of myself. As I made my way through the crowd, I caught sight of Mark. He looked the same at first glance, but the moment his eyes met mine, I noticed a flicker of surprise, almost disbelief. I could see that he hadn't expected to see me like this. There was no recognition of the woman he had once married. Only a stunned pause as he processed the woman standing before him, radiant and self-assured. I moved with calm composure, greeting acquaintances and clients, carefully maintaining my air of confidence. Then I saw Linda and the rest of his family. Their expressions changed almost immediately, subtle shifts in posture, quick glances, a brief tightening of their smiles. I could sense embarrassment simmering beneath the surface, a quiet realization that perhaps they had underestimated me, that their past cruelty had not just been unfair, but also short-sighted. I didn't approach them directly. I didn't need to speak harsh words or demand acknowledgement. My presence alone was a statement. Every confident step, every poised gesture, and the knowledge that I had arrived at this event on my own terms said more than any argument could. I saw their eyes follow me occasionally, their whispered remarks catching my attention without me needing to respond. I remained composed, smiling politely when necessary, fully aware that I was proving my worth silently but powerfully. Mark tried to start a conversation, but it was awkward. He spoke cautiously, choosing his words as if unsure how to navigate this new version of me. I responded politely, keeping my tone calm and measured, showing that I had nothing to hide and nothing to fear. The woman he had known no longer existed. She had been replaced by someone unshakable and self-reliant. Throughout the evening, I noticed how the subtle shifts in the room mirrored my transformation. People were impressed by my work, my professionalism, and my elegance. I watched as his family realized, perhaps for the first time, the depth of what they had dismissed. It wasn't about shame or embarrassment. They were simply confronted with the undeniable fact that I had built a successful, meaningful life without their approval or support. By the end of the night, I felt a quiet satisfaction settle over me. I had arrived not seeking revenge with words or anger, but with presence, with achievement, and with grace. Their reactions confirmed what I already knew. I had grown stronger, wiser, and more radiant than they could have imagined. And in that realization, I found the sense of triumph I had been waiting for all these years. As the evening continued, I decided it was time to share the part of my life that truly reflected how far I had come. I had kept it private until now, not out of shame, but because it was deeply personal. I had always dreamed of being a mother, and despite everything, I had found a way to create the family I wanted. I revealed to the small group around me that I had adopted a child, a little boy named Liam, full of energy and laughter, who had completely transformed my life. The reactions were immediate. Mark's jaw tightened, and I could see the shock in his eyes. Linda's hand flew to her mouth, and the rest of the family froze for a moment, unsure of how to respond. I didn't need to explain in detail. My words were calm and steady, full of warmth and pride. I let the story speak for itself. I had built a home filled with love and purpose, something they had told me I would never have. I watched as they processed it. There was no yelling, no dramatic confrontation, just stunned silence. And in that quiet, I could see them realizing that their cruelty, their insistence that I was inadequate because I was childless, had not defeated me. It had not broken me. Instead, it had driven me to create a life of my own choosing, full of meaning and happiness. Their disbelief was a reflection of the power I now held over my own destiny, a quiet but undeniable triumph. Mark tried to speak, but his words faltered. I answered politely, but without warmth, making it clear that while I had empathy for him, my life no longer revolved around him or his family. I stood with dignity and grace, letting the joy in my life, the love I shared with my son, the achievements I had earned, be the only statement I needed to make. There was no need for anger or revenge. The truth of my success, my independence, and my happiness was enough to show that I had overcome everything they had done. Seeing their reactions, I felt a sense of poetic justice. The family that had once cast me aside now faced the reality that I had thrived in ways they could never have imagined. I had created a life on my own terms, and it was filled with love, stability, and accomplishment. Every hurtful word and judgment had fueled my determination, and now the outcome was undeniable. That night, I left the gala with my head held high, my heart full of pride. The life-changing surprise wasn't just the adoption. It was the realization that I had taken control of my story, turning heartbreak and betrayal into empowerment and joy. I had built the family I had always dreamed of, and in doing so, I proved to myself, and to those who doubted me, that true strength comes from within. When the gala finally came to an end, I stepped outside into the cool night air feeling lighter than I had in years. The event had been a success, not just professionally, but personally. I had faced the people who once tried to diminish me, and I had done so with dignity, grace, and quiet confidence. Every glance, every word, and every moment had reminded me that I no longer needed anyone's approval to feel worthy. As I watched Mark and his family leave the gala, I could sense the change in them. Their expressions were heavy, a mix of guilt, regret, and maybe even envy. They had once assumed I would fail, that life would always bend to their expectations, but now they were confronted with the reality that I had thrived without them. I didn't feel the need to speak, to scold, or to demand recognition. The proof of my worth was already visible, and it was enough. Walking to my car, I reflected on everything I had endured, the heartbreak, the humiliation, the endless doubts and questions I had faced. All of it had shaped me, yes, but it had not defeated me. I realized that the triumph I felt was not in making them feel small, but in reclaiming my life, my confidence, and my happiness. My joy was no longer tied to their opinions. It was self-made, nurtured through hard work, determination, and the love I had built in my own family. I thought about Liam, about the life we were creating together, and a sense of peace washed over me. I didn't need revenge in the way people often imagine it: anger, confrontation, or public humiliation. The real victory was in my fulfillment, in knowing that I had taken control of my story, and that I was living the life I had always dreamed of. The quiet satisfaction I felt was deeper than any fleeting moment of retribution could ever be. As I drove home that night, I allowed myself to smile freely. I no longer carried the weight of others' judgment or the pain of being rejected. Every decision I had made, every struggle I had faced, had led me to this moment of closure. I felt complete, not because anyone else had validated me, but because I had proven to myself that I was capable of building a meaningful, happy life on my own. That night marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I had faced betrayal and emerged stronger. I had turned heartbreak into growth and rejection into empowerment. And as I held my son close and thought of the life we were creating together, I knew that the greatest revenge, the most profound triumph, was simply living well with integrity, joy, and the quiet certainty that I was enough, exactly as I was. Years after that night at the gala, I often find myself reflecting on the journey that brought me here. The heartbreak, the betrayal, and the humiliation I endured once felt unbearable. But looking back, I see now that each painful moment shaped me into the woman I became. Every obstacle taught me resilience. Every doubt pushed me to work harder, and every act of cruelty from Mark and his family reminded me that my worth could never be dictated by others. I survived, and more importantly, I thrived. My life is full now, not just with my son, Liam, but with a sense of purpose I had never known before. I've continued to grow my business, taking on projects that challenge me and bring joy to others. But beyond my professional success, I've found meaning in mentoring young women in Denver, especially those who are struggling with self-doubt or facing obstacles in their own lives. I share my story with them, not for sympathy, but as a lesson that perseverance, self-belief, and determination can turn pain into strength. Watching them gain confidence and take steps toward their own dreams reminds me of how far I've come, and it fills me with pride. I often think about what I learned from betrayal. The hardest lessons were not about the people who hurt me, but about myself, about trusting my own instincts, valuing my own worth, and refusing to let fear or anger guide my decisions. I learned that true strength is quiet, steady, and rooted in dignity. Revenge isn't about hurting someone else. It's about reclaiming your life and finding happiness despite the wrongs done to you. Looking at Liam, seeing him grow and thrive in a home full of love, I understand now what true triumph feels like. The family that once rejected me is no longer a part of my world, but their absence taught me to rely on myself and to build a life that cannot be shaken by judgment or cruelty. My happiness, my confidence, and my achievements are entirely mine, created through hard work, resilience, and self-belief. If there's one message I could leave anyone listening to my story, it's this. The best revenge is living well, with love and dignity. You don't need to fight back with anger or bitterness. Let your life, your joy, and your accomplishments speak for you. Life has a way of balancing itself, and the most satisfying triumph is quietly proving that nothing and no one can take away your strength, your dreams, or your happiness. As I look toward the future, I carry hope, empowerment, and gratitude for the journey. Betrayal once seemed like the end, but it became the beginning of everything I was meant to achieve. And in that transformation, I found the kind of justice that no words or actions could give. Justice through living fully, loving deeply, and standing tall no matter what anyone else thinks.